The letter arrived on silver salver, its wax seal already broken. Lady Arabella Fairmont's hands trembled as she unfolded the cream parchment, her eyes scanning words that would shatter the carefully constructed facade of her impending marriage. The Marquis of Ashford, her betrothed, the man she had been groomed to marry since childhood, had penned his true feelings to another. "She is merely a means to an end," he had written, "a docile creature whose fortune will restore what my family has squandered." But it was the final line that stole the breath from her lungs. "Once the vows are spoken, I shall be free to pursue my true affections elsewhere." The letter slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the floor like a wounded bird. In 3 days, she would stand before all of London society at the season's most anticipated ball, where the Marquis was expected to formally announce their engagement. But now, Arabella knew the truth, and the truth was a weapon she was not yet certain how to wield. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments which part of the world you're listening from. I want to know how far it has traveled. Arabella Fairmont had been raised for one purpose, to become the Marchioness of Ashford. From her earliest memories, this destiny had been whispered in drawing rooms, discussed over tea, and reinforced with every lesson in deportment, every hour at the pianoforte, every careful selection of her wardrobe. Her mother, the formidable Countess of Fairmont, had orchestrated this union with the precision of a military campaign, and Arabella had been the willing, if increasingly uncertain, soldier in that campaign. The Fairmont estate in Mayfair stood as a testament to old wealth and older expectations. Its cream-colored facade gleamed in the spring sunlight, its windows reflecting the perfectly manicured gardens where Arabella had spent countless afternoons practicing the art of being ornamental. Inside, every room spoke of refinement. Wedgwood jasperware adorned the mantelpieces, portraits of stern ancestors lined the walls, and the air perpetually carried the scent of beeswax and roses. At 22, Arabella possessed the kind of beauty that society deemed appropriate for a future marchioness: chestnut hair that fell in soft waves, grey eyes that reflected the English sky, and a complexion that required no artifice. Her figure was slender and graceful, her movements measured and elegant. She had been trained to be perfect, and by all accounts, she had succeeded. The Marquis of Ashford, Lord Sterling Thorne, was considered one of the season's greatest prizes. At 30, he cut an impressive figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair swept back from a high forehead, sharp blue eyes, and features that suggested both aristocratic breeding and a certain hardness of character. His family's lineage stretched back to the Norman conquest, and though whispers circulated about the estate's declining fortunes, his title and connections remained unassailable. Arabella had met him a dozen times over the past year, always under the watchful eyes of chaperones and family members. Their conversations had been pleasant, if somewhat formal. He spoke of his estates in Yorkshire, his seat in the House of Lords, his plans for restoring the family's prominence. She had listened, smiled, and imagined herself as the mistress of his grand but reportedly crumbling manor. She had even allowed herself to believe that affection might grow between them, that the arrangement her parents had made might blossom into something resembling love. "You are most fortunate, Arabella," her mother had said just that morning as they sat in the morning room reviewing the guest list for the upcoming ball. The Countess was a handsome woman in her late 40s, her blonde hair only slightly faded, her posture rigid with propriety. The Marquis of Ashford could have chosen any young woman in London. That he has chosen you is a testament to your breeding and accomplishments. "Yes, Mamma," Arabella had replied, as she always did. But even then, before the letter arrived, she had felt a growing unease. There was something in Sterling's manner, a coolness in his gaze when he looked at her, a perfunctory quality to his compliments, that suggested duty rather than desire. Her days followed a predictable pattern. Mornings were spent in correspondence and household management lessons with her mother. Afternoons brought social calls, walks in Hyde Park, or shopping expeditions to Bond Street, always accompanied by her lady's maid, Martha, a quiet woman of 40 who had served the family for 2 decades. Evenings were filled with dinners, soirees, and the endless parade of social obligations that defined a young woman of her station. Arabella had one confidant, one person with whom she could speak freely, her father's sister, Aunt Agatha, who lived in a fashionable townhouse in Bloomsbury. Agatha Fairmont had never married, a choice that had scandalized the family 30 years earlier, but which she had never regretted. Now in her 50s, she was a striking woman with silver-streaked dark hair, keen, intelligent eyes, and a wardrobe that favored rich jewel tones over the pastels deemed appropriate for unmarried ladies. She hosted a salon that attracted writers, artists, and intellectuals, a world far removed from the rigid social circles in which Arabella moved. "Do you love him?" Aunt Agatha had asked bluntly during Arabella's last visit, 3 weeks before the fateful letter arrived. They had been sitting in Agatha's library, a room lined floor to ceiling with books, where the air smelled of leather bindings and the bergamot tea her aunt favored. Rain pattered against the windows, and a fire crackled in the grate. I believe I could learn to love him," Arabella had replied carefully. "He is everything a woman in my position should desire. That is not what I asked." Agatha's gaze had been penetrating. "I asked if you love him. Not if you could, not if you should, but if you do." Arabella had looked away, unable to meet her aunt's eyes. "I am not certain I know what love is, Aunt. I know duty. I know expectation. Perhaps that is enough, my dear child," Agatha had said softly, reaching across to take Arabella's hand. "Duty and expectation are cold companions for a lifetime. I've lived alone by choice, but you are choosing a life sentence with a man you do not love. Are you certain this is the path you wish to walk?" But Arabella had not answered, because she had not known how to answer. The path had been laid out before her since birth. To question it now seemed not only futile but dangerous. Then the letter had arrived. It had come that afternoon, delivered by mistake to the Fairmont residence instead of to Lady Charlotte Pembroke, Sterling's cousin, a beautiful, ambitious young woman of 25 who had been a frequent presence at family gatherings. The footman, assuming it was correspondence for Arabella regarding the upcoming ball, had brought it directly to her sitting room. The moment Arabella saw the broken seal and recognized Sterling's handwriting, she should have returned it unopened. But curiosity, or perhaps some instinct for self-preservation, had compelled her to read. The words had been devastating in their casual cruelty. Sterling had written to Charlotte with an intimacy that made Arabella's stomach turn. He spoke of their understanding, of the tedious necessity of his marriage to Arabella, of how her substantial dowry would allow him to restore Ashford Manor and maintain the lifestyle to which he was accustomed. "She is biddable and unimaginative," he had written, "which will serve our purposes well. Once the marriage is secured, we shall be free to continue as we have been, my darling Charlotte. Society will turn a blind eye, as it always does for men of my station." Arabella had read the letter 3 times, each reading bringing a fresh wave of humiliation and anger. She was not naive. She understood that many aristocratic marriages were arrangements of convenience, that affection was often found outside the marriage bed. But to see her own worth reduced to a financial transaction, to be described as biddable and unimaginative, to know that her future husband was already planning his infidelities before the vows were even spoken, it was unbearable. She had sat in her sitting room for hours, the letter clutched in her hands, watching the afternoon light fade to dusk. Martha had knocked twice, concerned about her mistress missing tea, but Arabella had sent her away. She needed time to think, to decide what to do with this terrible knowledge. The ball was in 3 days. All of London society would be there. Sterling would make his formal announcement, and Arabella would be expected to smile graciously, to accept the congratulations, to step willingly into the golden cage that had been prepared for her. But now she knew the truth, and as she sat in the gathering darkness, Arabella felt something shift inside her, a small, fierce spark of rebellion that she had never allowed herself to feel before. She did not yet know what she would do, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would not walk blindly into this marriage. She would not be biddable and unimaginative. She would not be the fool Sterling Thorne believed her to be. As night fell completely, and the lamplighter made his rounds on the street below, Arabella finally rose from her chair. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in her writing desk, locking the drawer with a small brass key that she tucked into her bodice. Then she rang for Martha and requested a bath and her nightclothes, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. Tomorrow she would visit Aunt Agatha. Tomorrow she would begin to plan. But tonight she would allow herself to grieve for the future she had imagined, however modest and uncertain it had been, and prepare herself for whatever was to come. The golden cage was still there, its door standing open, but Arabella Fairmont was no longer certain she would step inside. The night of the ball arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if even the weather conspired to make the evening memorable. The Ashford family's London residence, a grand Georgian mansion in Grosvenor Square, blazed with light from every window. Carriages lined the street, disgorging elegantly dressed guests who ascended the marble steps beneath the portico where liveried footmen stood at attention. Arabella arrived with her parents in the Fairmont carriage, her mother's excitement palpable in the confined space. The Countess had outdone herself in preparation for this evening, commissioning a gown for Arabella that had cost more than some families earned in a year. It was a confection of ivory, silk and Brussels lace with delicate embroidery. At the hem and neckline, the bodice fitted to perfection, the skirt falling in graceful folds that whispered with each movement. Arabella's hair had been dressed in an elaborate arrangement of curls and braids woven through with seed pearls. She wore her grandmother's diamond necklace, the stones cold against her throat. She looked, as her mother had declared with satisfaction, like a future marchioness. But beneath the beautiful facade, Arabella's heart hammered with a mixture of dread and determination. The letter remained locked in her desk at home, but its words were seared into her memory. For 3 days she had wrestled with her options. She had visited Aunt Agatha, who had listened to the entire sordid tale with growing outrage. "You must expose him," Agatha had declared. "You must make the contents of that letter known before he can trap you in this marriage." But Arabella had hesitated. To expose Sterling publicly would create a scandal that would taint her as much as him. Society did not look kindly on young women who made private matters public. Regardless of the justification, her reputation would be ruined, her family humiliated, her prospects destroyed. "Then you must refuse him," Agatha had said. "When he makes his announcement, you must publicly decline." That option seemed only marginally better. To refuse such an advantageous match without explanation would be seen as madness or caprice. Her parents would be furious. The gossip would be merciless. In the end, Arabella had decided to confront Sterling privately before the announcement, to let him know that she had discovered his deception and would not proceed with the marriage. It was the most dignified course, the one that might allow both parties to withdraw gracefully, with some excuse about incompatibility or changed circumstances. But as she entered the ballroom on her father's arm, Arabella felt her resolve waver. The room was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the polished floor, banks of hothouse flowers perfumed the air, and the cream of London society filled the space with their glittering presence. An orchestra played in the gallery above, and couples already moved through the figures of a country dance. Sterling stood near the center of the room, resplendent in black evening dress, his cravat tied in an intricate waterfall, a ruby pin glinting at his throat. He was surrounded by well-wishers and sycophants, accepting their congratulations with the easy confidence of a man who had never doubted his place in the world. When he saw Arabella, he smiled, a smile that did not reach his eyes, and began making his way toward her. "Lady Arabella," he said, bowing over her hand. "You are radiant this evening, the very picture of perfection." The words that had once pleased her now rang hollow. She saw him clearly now, the coldness behind the charm, the calculation in every gesture. "Lord Ashford," she replied, her voice steady, "might I have a word with you in private before the evening proceeds?" Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or annoyance. "Surely whatever you wish to discuss can wait until after our announcement, my dear. I would not wish to keep our guests waiting." "It cannot wait," Arabella insisted, lowering her voice. "It is a matter of some urgency." Before Sterling could respond, Lady Charlotte Pembroke materialized at his elbow. She was stunning in emerald silk that complemented her auburn hair and green eyes, her figure more voluptuous than Arabella's slender frame, her smile predatory. "Cousin," she purred, placing a possessive hand on Sterling's arm, "surely you are not going to keep your lovely bride-to-be all to yourself. We are all so eager to hear the happy announcement." Arabella felt a surge of anger so intense it nearly took her breath away. Charlotte knew, of course she knew, she was the recipient of the letter, the woman Sterling truly wanted, the architect of this humiliation. And she was enjoying it, savoring Arabella's ignorance and impending disgrace. "Lady Charlotte," Arabella said coolly, "I was just requesting a moment of Lord Ashford's time for a private conversation." "How mysterious," Charlotte replied, her smile widening. "But I'm afraid it will have to wait, dear Arabella. The musicians are ready, and Sterling has promised me the honor of the first dance after the announcement. Haven't you, cousin?" Sterling looked between the two women, clearly uncomfortable with the tension crackling in the air. "Charlotte, perhaps—" "No, no," Charlotte interrupted, her voice rising just enough to draw the attention of nearby guests. "I insist we proceed as planned. After all, everyone is here to celebrate your engagement to dear, sweet, biddable Arabella." The word hung in the air like a slap. Arabella felt the blood drain from her face. Charlotte had emphasized biddable with unmistakable mockery, and several guests had turned to look, sensing drama. "Charlotte," Sterling said sharply, "that is quite enough." But Charlotte was not finished. She had been drinking champagne steadily since the evening began, and now her inhibitions had loosened. "Oh, come now, Sterling. Surely there's no harm in speaking plainly among family. We all know this is a marriage of convenience. Poor Arabella's fortune will save your crumbling estate, and in return she gets a title and the privilege of looking the other way while you pursue your true interests." The music had stopped. Conversations around them had ceased. A circle of silence was spreading through the ballroom as more and more guests turned to witness the unfolding scene. Arabella felt as if she were watching from a great distance, as if this were happening to someone else. She saw her mother's horrified face across the room, her father's growing anger, Aunt Agatha pushing through the crowd toward her. But most of all, she saw Sterling's face, not shocked or apologetic, but calculating, as if he were rapidly assessing how to salvage the situation. "You have had too much champagne, Charlotte," he said firmly. "You are speaking nonsense." "Am I?" Charlotte's voice was shrill now, reckless. "Shall I tell everyone about your letter, cousin? The one where you described your future wife as unimaginative and merely examination room, a small surgery, and a dispensary where medicines were prepared. The walls were whitewashed but stained with damp. The furniture was mismatched and worn, but everything was scrupulously clean, and the staff, 2 nurses and a young medical student, moved with efficient purpose. Arabella spent the day observing, helping where she could, and learning more in those few hours than she had in 22 years of privileged existence. She held a feverish child while Elias examined him, spoke gently to a frightened young woman suffering from consumption, and helped the nurses change bandages on wounds that made her stomach turn. She saw poverty not as an abstract concept, but as a living reality. The hollow-eyed mothers who could not feed their children, the men crippled by factory accidents with no means of support, the elderly left to die alone because their families could not afford to care for them. "You did well today," Elias said as evening fell and the last patient departed. They stood in the empty waiting room, both exhausted. Many people of your background would have fled within the first hour. I nearly did, Arabella admitted. But then I thought, if these people must live this reality every day, surely I can bear to witness it for a few hours. That is the beginning of true compassion, Elias said. Not pity from a distance, but genuine understanding born of proximity. Over the following weeks, Arabella returned to the clinic regularly. She learned to assist with basic medical procedures, to comfort frightened patients, to organize the chaotic record-keeping system. She discovered that she had a talent for administration and fundraising, skills honed in managing her mother's household, now applied to a worthier cause. She began writing letters to wealthy acquaintances, appealing for donations. She organized a charity lecture series at Agatha's house, inviting speakers on public health and social reform, charging admission and directing the proceeds to the clinic. Her parents, who had initially demanded her return home, gradually accepted her new life with a mixture of resignation and bewilderment. Her father, surprisingly, had defended her to his peers, declaring that Sterling Thorne was a scoundrel who deserved his public humiliation. Her mother remained convinced that Arabella had lost her senses, but even she could not deny that her daughter seemed happier than she had ever been. The scandal, as Agatha had predicted, gradually faded. New gossip replaced old. Sterling had left London for his Yorkshire estate, reportedly furious and humiliated. Charlotte had been sent to live with relatives in Scotland, her reputation in tatters. And Arabella, once the subject of vicious mockery, was now viewed with a kind of puzzled respect by those who heard of her charitable work. Then came the invitation to Lady Pemberton's autumn ball. Lady Pemberton was one of London's most influential hostesses, a woman whose social gatherings could make or break reputations. The invitation was unexpected. Arabella had assumed her social exile would be permanent. But the note that accompanied it was warm, even admiring. My dear Lady Arabella, your courage and your charitable endeavours have not gone unnoticed. It would be my honour to welcome you to my home and to introduce you to several individuals who share your commitment to social reform. I do hope you will attend. Arabella showed the invitation to Agatha, who read it with a knowing smile. Lady Pemberton is a shrewd woman. She recognizes that you have become something far more interesting than a conventional debutante. You have become someone with purpose and conviction. That is rare in our circles, and she wishes to claim you for her own salon before someone else does. Should I accept? That depends. Are you ready to face society again? Sterling will likely be there. Charlotte as well if she has returned from Scotland. It will not be comfortable. Arabella considered. 3 months ago, the thought of facing Sterling would have filled her with dread, but she was not the same woman who had fled the Ashford ball in tears. She had spent her days in the East End, confronting genuine suffering and working to alleviate it. Sterling's opinion of her seemed suddenly trivial by comparison. I will go, she said, but not alone. I would like Elias to accompany me. Agatha's eyebrows rose. That is a bold choice. Dr. Reed is not of your social class. His presence will be noted and remarked upon. Good, Arabella said firmly. Let them remark. If I am to re-enter society, I will do so on my own terms, with people I respect by my side. When she proposed the idea to Elias, he was hesitant. Arabella, I am not comfortable in such settings. I have neither the wardrobe nor the manners for a society ball. You have intelligence, integrity, and compassion, Arabella replied. That is worth more than all the polished manners in London. Besides, Lady Pemberton specifically mentioned wanting to meet individuals committed to social reform. You are exactly the sort of person she wishes to cultivate. And is that the only reason you wish me to accompany you? Elias asked quietly. To demonstrate your commitment to reform? Arabella felt heat rise in her cheeks. Over the past months, her feelings for Elias had deepened from respect to something far more profound. She admired his dedication, his kindness, his unwavering principles. But more than that, she felt truly seen by him in a way she never had been before. He valued her mind, her efforts, her growing understanding of the world beyond her privileged upbringing. When he looked at her, she did not see the reflection of a decorative object or a financial asset, but a partner in meaningful work. "No," she said softly, "that is not the only reason. I wish you to accompany me because I value your presence, because I am happier when you are near, because She hesitated, then continued with quiet courage. "Because I have come to care for you very deeply, Elias, and I would be honored to have you by my side." Elias's expression softened. He reached out and took her hand, a gesture that would have been scandalous in her former life, but which now felt perfectly natural. "I care for you as well, Arabella. More than I should, perhaps. You are a lady, and I am a physician with no fortune and no prospects beyond my work. I have nothing to offer you but a life of hard work and modest means." "You offer me something far more valuable," Arabella said. "You offer me purpose, partnership, and the chance to make a genuine difference in the world. That is worth more than all the titles and estates in England." "Then I will accompany you to this ball," Elias said, "and face down your former world together." The night of Lady Pemberton's ball arrived with the first chill of autumn in the air. Arabella wore a gown of deep sapphire silk, simpler than her former elaborate confections, but elegant in its clean lines and expert tailoring. She had sold most of her jewelry to fund the clinic's expansion, but she wore her grandmother's pearl earrings and a simple gold bracelet that had been Agatha's gift. Elias, in borrowed evening clothes that Agatha's late father's tailor had hastily altered, looked uncomfortable but distinguished. His hair was neatly trimmed for once, his jaw freshly shaved, revealing the strong bones of his face. Arabella thought he had never looked more handsome. They arrived at Lady Pemberton's Mayfair mansion to find it ablaze with light and filled with guests. But the atmosphere was different from the Ashford ball, less ostentatious, more intellectual. Arabella recognized several faces from Agatha's salon, as well as prominent reformers, writers and politicians known for their progressive views. Lady Pemberton herself greeted them warmly, a handsome woman in her 50s with keen eyes and an air of authority. "Lady Arabella, how delightful. And you must be Dr. Reed. I have heard remarkable things about your clinic. You must tell me all about your work." As Elias engaged Lady Pemberton in conversation about public health initiatives, Arabella felt a presence behind her. She turned to find Sterling Thorne, looking older and harder than she remembered, his face etched with bitterness. "Arabella," he said coldly, "I see you have recovered from your hysteria sufficiently to show your face in society again." "Lord Ashford," she replied evenly, "I was never hysterical. I was simply honest about your character and my refusal to marry you. You destroyed my reputation with your lies and theatrics." "I destroyed nothing. You destroyed your own reputation with your arrogance and cruelty. I merely refused to be complicit in it." Sterling's face flushed with anger. "And now you parade yourself with this tradesman, this nobody, as if to prove some point. You have fallen far, Arabella, from a future marchioness to the companion of a common physician who treats paupers." "I have not fallen," Arabella said quietly but firmly. "I have risen. I have found work that matters, people who value me for who I am, rather than what I can provide, and a man who treats me with respect and genuine affection. That is worth far more than a title purchased with my fortune and my dignity." Before Sterling could respond, Elias appeared at her side, his presence solid and reassuring. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his tone polite, but his eyes hard as he assessed Sterling. "No problem at all," Sterling said with a sneer. "I was simply observing how far Lady Arabella has lowered herself, from the daughter of an earl to the mistress of a charity doctor." "I am no one's mistress," Arabella said sharply. "Dr. Reed is my friend and colleague in work that actually helps people, rather than simply maintaining the appearance of gentility while exploiting others for personal gain." "You self-righteous little fool," Sterling hissed. "Do you think your charitable work makes you superior? You are playing at poverty, slumming among the poor, to assuage your guilt and feel important. But you will always be what you were born to be, a privileged, naive child who understands nothing of the real world. I understand more than you ever will, Arabella replied. I understand that true worth is not measured in titles or estates, but in how we treat those who have no power to benefit us. I understand that compassion is not weakness, and that using others for personal gain is not strength, and I understand that I would rather spend my life making a small difference in the world than spend it as your wife, ignored and despised while you pursue your pleasures elsewhere. A small crowd had gathered, drawn by the rising voices. Arabella saw Charlotte among them, her face pale and strained, her earlier confidence gone. She saw Lady Pemberton watching with interest, and several other guests nodding in approval at Arabella's words. Sterling seemed to realize he had lost the audience, his face twisted with impotent rage. "You will regret this," he said. "Both of you. Society may find your little rebellion amusing now, but it will tire of you soon enough. And when it does, you will have nothing, no husband, no prospects, no future." "On the contrary," said a new voice, cultured and authoritative. A distinguished gentleman in his 60s stepped forward. Lord Pemberton, Lady Pemberton's husband, a prominent member of Parliament known for his reform efforts. "Lady Arabella will have the support and respect of everyone in this room who values integrity over empty status. And Dr. Reed will have the funding he needs to expand his clinic, as I intend to propose a bill for public health funding that will use his work as a model." He turned to Elias, extending his hand. "Dr. Reed, I have been wanting to meet you for some time. Your clinic's success rates are remarkable, and your methods could revolutionize how we approach medical care for the poor. I would very much like to discuss a partnership." Elias shook his hand, looking stunned. "My lord, That would be extraordinary. Excellent. We shall arrange a meeting." Lord Pemberton turned back to Sterling with barely concealed contempt. "Lord Ashford, I believe you have overstayed your welcome. My wife invited you as a courtesy, but you have abused that courtesy with your boorish behavior. I must ask you to leave." Sterling's face went purple with humiliation. He looked around at the assembled guests, seeking support, but found only cold stares and averted eyes. Even Charlotte had turned away, unwilling to be associated with his disgrace. Without another word, Sterling turned on his heel and strode from the room, his exit watched by dozens of eyes. The moment he was gone, conversation resumed, but the tone had changed. Several guests approached Arabella and Elias, expressing admiration for their work and offering support. Lady Pemberton herself came to Arabella's side. "My dear, that was magnificently done. You have shown more courage and grace in these past months than most people display in a lifetime. I hope you will consider me a friend and ally in your endeavors." "Thank you, Lady Pemberton," Arabella said, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of fortune. "Your support means a great deal." As the evening progressed, Arabella found herself at the center of a new kind of social circle, one based not on birth or wealth, but on shared values and commitment to meaningful change. She introduced Elias to potential donors and supporters, watched him discuss his work with passion and expertise, and felt a surge of pride in both his accomplishments and her own. Later, as they stood together on Lady Pemberton's terrace, looking out over the gas-lit streets of Mayfair, Elias turned to her with an expression of wonder. "This evening has been extraordinary. Lord Pemberton's support could change everything for the clinic. We could expand, hire more staff, reach so many more people." "You deserve it," Arabella said warmly. "Your work is remarkable, Elias. It should be recognized and supported." "I could not have done this without you," he said softly. "Your fundraising, your organizational skills, your ability to navigate these social waters, you have been essential to everything we have accomplished." "We make a good team," Arabella said. "We do." Elias hesitated, then took both her hands in his. "Arabella, I know this is not the time or place, and I know I should speak to your father first, but I cannot wait any longer. These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You have brought not only practical help to my work, but joy to my days and hope to my heart. I am not a wealthy man, and I cannot offer you the life you were born to, but I can offer you my whole heart, my complete devotion, and a partnership in work that matters. Would you consider becoming my wife? Arabella felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, Elias, I will marry you, not despite the life you offer, but because of it. I want nothing more than to spend my days working beside you, making a difference in the world, and building a life based on love and shared purpose rather than social obligation. Elias pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Arabella felt a sense of rightness settle over her like a benediction. This was where she belonged, not in a gilded cage, not as an ornament to enhance someone else's status, but here, with this good man doing work that mattered. Behind them, through the terrace doors, they could hear the music and laughter of the ball continuing. But out here, in the cool autumn night, they stood together in their own private moment of perfect happiness. Two people who had found each other against all odds and chosen a future built on love, respect, and shared conviction. The golden cage was gone. In its place was something far more valuable: freedom, purpose, and a love that saw her truly and completely. The announcement of Arabella's engagement to Dr. Elias Reed sent ripples through London society, but the reaction was markedly different from what would have occurred 6 months earlier. The scandal of the Ashford ball had transformed Arabella from a conventional debutante into something far more interesting. A woman of principle who had rejected privilege for purpose. Her work at the clinic, her fundraising efforts, and her public stand against Sterling's cruelty had earned her a reputation for courage and compassion that transcended traditional social boundaries. Her parents' reaction was mixed. Her father, after an initial meeting with Elias, had grudgingly admitted that the young physician was a decent fellow with good prospects, even if he isn't titled. Her mother had wept, mourned the loss of her daughter's chance at becoming a marchioness, and then, surprisingly, rallied. "If you must marry a doctor," the Countess had declared, "at least he is a respectable one with influential supporters, and Lord Pemberton's patronage is nothing to dismiss." The wedding was planned for early winter, a small ceremony at Agatha's parish church, followed by a modest reception. Arabella had insisted on simplicity. No elaborate trousseau, no grand society wedding, no ostentatious display. She wanted a celebration that reflected their values and their future life together. But before the wedding, there was one final confrontation to face. It came on a grey November afternoon, as Arabella was leaving the clinic after a long day. She'd been organising supplies in the dispensary when Martha, her former lady's maid, who now helped at the clinic twice weekly, hurried in with a worried expression. "My lady, there's someone here to see you, Lady Charlotte Pembroke. She's waiting in the street outside. She says it's urgent." Arabella felt a flash of apprehension, but she squared her shoulders and walked outside. Charlotte stood beside a hired carriage. Her appearance dramatically changed from the confident, beautiful woman who had taunted Arabella at the Ashford ball. She looked thinner, her face pale and drawn, her fashionable gown hanging loosely on her frame. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hands trembled as she clutched her reticule. "Lady Charlotte," Arabella said coolly, "this is unexpected." "I know I have no right to ask for your time," Charlotte said, her voice lacking its former arrogance, "but I must speak with you. Please, just a few moments." Against her better judgment, Arabella nodded. "Very well. There is a tea shop around the corner. We can speak there." They walked in silence to the modest establishment, taking a table in the corner away from other patrons. Arabella ordered tea for them both, then waited for Charlotte to speak. "I have come to apologize," Charlotte said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "for everything. For my cruelty at the ball, for my affair with Sterling, for my part in the plan to deceive you." Arabella studied her former rival carefully. What has prompted this sudden attack of conscience? The consequences of my actions, Charlotte replied bitterly. After the ball, I was sent to Scotland in disgrace. My family was humiliated. My prospects were destroyed. I spent months in isolation, reflecting on what I had done and who I had become. She looked up, her green eyes filled with genuine remorse. I was jealous of you, Arabella. You had everything I wanted: beauty, grace, a substantial dowry, a secure future. When Sterling approached me with his scheme, I told myself I was simply taking what should have been mine. But the truth is, I was cruel and selfish, and I hurt you deliberately because I envied what you had. And Sterling? Arabella asked. What of him? Charlotte's expression hardened. Sterling cares for no one but himself. He used me as thoroughly as he planned to use you. Once the scandal broke and I was no longer useful to him, he discarded me without a second thought. He has returned to Yorkshire, where he is apparently courting a wealthy merchant's daughter, someone with even more money than you, and less likely to discover his true nature before the wedding. Arabella felt a pang of pity for this unknown woman, but also gratitude that she had escaped that fate. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know the truth, Charlotte said, and because I want to warn you. Sterling has not forgiven you for humiliating him. He speaks of you with venom, blames you for all his troubles. I do not think he would physically harm you, but he is vindictive and well-connected. Be careful, Arabella. He may yet try to damage your reputation or your work. I appreciate the warning, Arabella said carefully, but I am not afraid of Sterling Thorne. He has no power over me anymore. No, you have found something better, Charlotte said with a sad smile. I have heard about your engagement to Dr. Reed, about your work at the clinic. You have built a life of meaning and purpose, while she trailed off, looking down at her hands. I have nothing. My family barely speaks to me. No respectable man will have me. I'm 25 years old, and my life is effectively over. It does not have to be, Arabella said quietly. The anger she had carried toward Charlotte had faded over the months, replaced by a more complex understanding. Charlotte had been cruel, yes, but she had also been a product of a society that taught women to compete for male approval, to view other women as rivals rather than allies, to measure their worth by their ability to secure advantageous marriages. You could choose a different path, as I did. You could find work that matters, contribute something meaningful to the world. Charlotte laughed bitterly. With my reputation, who would employ me? What could I possibly do? There are always options, Arabella said. The clinic needs help. We need someone to manage our fundraising efforts, to organize charity events, to cultivate relationships with potential donors. You have social skills and connections that could be valuable if you chose to use them for good rather than for personal advancement. Charlotte stared at her in disbelief. You would offer me employment after everything I did to you? I would offer you a chance, Arabella corrected, a chance to become someone better than you were. Whether you take it is your choice. Tears spilled down Charlotte's cheeks. I do not deserve your kindness. Perhaps not, Arabella agreed, but I have learned that holding on to anger and resentment only poisons the one who carries it. I choose to let go of what you did to me and offer you the same opportunity I was given, a chance to start again. Charlotte wiped her eyes with a trembling hand. I do not know if I can do it. I do not know if I have the strength or the character. Neither did I, Arabella said gently. But I discovered that strength and character are not things we are born with. They are things we build through our choices and actions. Come to the clinic tomorrow. Meet Dr. Reed and see the work we do. Then decide if you want to be part of it. They parted outside the tea shop, Charlotte looking dazed but hopeful, Arabella feeling a strange sense of closure. She did not know if Charlotte would truly change, if the offer of redemption would be accepted or squandered, but she had extended it nonetheless, and that felt right. When she told Elias about the encounter that evening, he listened thoughtfully, then took her hand. You are a remarkable woman, Arabella Fairmont. Most people would have turned Charlotte away, and no one would have blamed you. But you chose compassion over vengeance. That is one of the many reasons I love you. I chose it because you taught me, Arabella replied. You showed me that everyone deserves a chance at redemption, that people are more than their worst moments. I am simply following your example. The weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of activity. Charlotte did come to the clinic the next day, and after a long conversation with Elias and Arabella, she accepted the position. She proved surprisingly capable, her social skills and understanding of society's expectations making her effective at cultivating donors and organizing fundraising events. She worked with quiet determination, as if trying to atone for her past through present action. Lord Pemberton made good on his promise, introducing legislation for public health funding and citing Elias's clinic as a model for effective, compassionate care. The bill faced opposition from those who believed the poor should be left to their own devices, but it gained momentum as more reformers rallied to the cause. Arabella spent her days preparing for her new life, not the elaborate preparations of her former engagement, but practical planning for a future of partnership and purpose. She and Elias found a modest house near the clinic, large enough for a small family but simple in its appointments. She sold the last of her elaborate gowns and jewelry, keeping only a few sentimental pieces, and donated the proceeds to the clinic's expansion fund. Her final visit to her parents' Mayfair mansion was bittersweet. Her mother had softened considerably, perhaps recognizing that Arabella's happiness was genuine in a way it had never been during her engagement to Sterling. "You look radiant, my dear," the Countess said as they sat in the morning room where so many of Arabella's childhood lessons had taken place. "I confess, I do not understand your choices, but I cannot deny that they have transformed you. You seem free." "I am free, Mama," Arabella replied. "For the first time in my life, I am making my own choices, pursuing my own path. It is terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I wish I had been brave enough to do the same," her mother said quietly, a rare moment of vulnerability. "I have lived my entire life according to others' expectations. I do not know who I might have been if I had chosen differently." Arabella embraced her mother, feeling a new understanding between them. "It is never too late, Mama. You could still choose to do something meaningful with your time and influence." The Countess smiled sadly. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I am too old and set in my ways. But you, my darling girl, you have your whole life ahead of you. Live it fully, live it bravely, and know that despite my tears and protests, I am proud of you." The day before the wedding, Arabella received an unexpected letter. It was from Sterling, forwarded from her parents' address. With trembling hands she opened it, unsure what to expect. The letter was brief and surprisingly devoid of venom. "Lady Arabella, I write not to apologize, for I suspect you would not believe me if I did, but to acknowledge a truth I have been reluctant to face. You were right to refuse me. I was arrogant, cruel, and foolish. I treated you as a means to an end, rather than as a person deserving of respect and honesty. You deserved better, and I am glad you found it. I have spent these months in Yorkshire reflecting on my choices and their consequences. I have lost much, my reputation, my pride, and any chance of genuine happiness. These losses are entirely my own fault. I hear you are to marry Dr. Reed tomorrow. I wish you joy, Arabella, genuine joy, of the kind I'm not capable of giving or receiving. You have built something meaningful from the ruins of our failed engagement. That takes courage I do not possess. I will not trouble you again. Consider this my final word on the matter, and perhaps the only honest thing I have ever said to you. You were too good for me, and I was too blind to see it until it was too late." Sterling-Thorne Arabella read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in her writing desk. It was not quite an apology, but it was an acknowledgement of her worth, of his failures, of the justice of her choice. It was enough. That evening, Aunt Agatha hosted a small dinner for Arabella, Elias, and their closest friends. The gathering was warm and intimate, filled with laughter and genuine affection. As Arabella looked around the table at the people who had supported her transformation, Agatha, who had offered refuge and wisdom, Elias, who had shown her a different way of living, Charlotte, who was tentatively rebuilding her life, the nurses and volunteers from the clinic who had become her friends, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "A toast," Agatha said, raising her glass, "to Arabella, who had the courage to reject a gilded cage and choose freedom. To Elias, who sees and values her true worth, and to both of you as you begin a partnership built on love, respect, and shared purpose. May your life together be filled with meaning, joy, and the satisfaction of work well done." "Hear, hear," the assembled guests chorused, raising their glasses. Arabella met Elias's eyes across the table and saw in them everything she had ever hoped for: love, respect, partnership, and the promise of a future built on their own terms. Tomorrow she would become his wife, not because society demanded it or her parents arranged it, but because she chose it freely and joyfully. The golden cage was gone forever. In its place was a life of her own making, and it was more beautiful than anything she could have imagined. 6 months after the wedding, Arabella stood in the newly expanded clinic, watching the morning sun stream through windows that had been cleaned and repaired with funds from Lord Pemberton's successful public health bill. The space had been transformed. What had once been a cramped, desperate operation now occupied 3 buildings, with separate wings for men, women, and children. A proper surgery, a dispensary stocked with modern medicines, and a small training facility where Elias taught medical students the principles of compassionate, effective care for all patients, regardless of their ability to pay. Arabella herself had changed as well. She wore a simple day dress of practical grey wool, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, her hands busy with the administrative work that kept the clinic running smoothly. She had discovered a talent for organization and management that her years of household training had prepared her for, though she had never imagined applying those skills to such meaningful work. She managed the staff, coordinated with donors, oversaw the budget, and still found time to work directly with patients, particularly the women and children who came seeking help. Her marriage to Elias was everything she had hoped for and more. They lived in their modest house near the clinic, sharing their days and their work, discussing cases over dinner, reading together in the evenings, and supporting each other through the challenges and triumphs of their shared mission. Elias treated her as a true partner, valuing her opinions, celebrating her successes, and standing beside her through difficulties. The physical intimacy of their marriage had been a revelation, not the duty she had been taught to expect, but a joyful expression of their love and mutual respect. She was also 3 months pregnant, a fact she had discovered just last week and had not yet shared with anyone but Elias. The news had filled them both with joy and trepidation, joy at the prospect of becoming parents, trepidation at the added responsibility and the changes it would bring to their work. But they had agreed that they would face it as they faced everything else, together, with love and practical planning. "Mrs. Reed," called one of the nurses, a capable young woman named Sarah, whom Arabella had trained herself. "The delegation from the Royal College of Physicians has arrived. Dr. Reed asked if you would join him in the conference room." Arabella smiled at the title, Mrs. Reed. She had never imagined that giving up her courtesy title of lady would feel like such a liberation, but it had. She was no longer defined by her father's rank or her potential husband's status. She was simply Arabella Reed, physician's wife, clinic administrator, and advocate for the poor. The conference room was filled with distinguished gentlemen in formal dress, looking somewhat out of place in the clinic's simple surroundings. Elias stood at the head of the table, presenting data on patient outcomes, mortality rates, and the effectiveness of preventive care. He spoke with confidence and authority, his passion for his work evident in every word. "As you can see, gentlemen," he was saying, "proper medical care provided early and consistently reduces not only suffering, but also the overall cost to society. When we treat a child's fever before it becomes pneumonia, when we provide prenatal care to expectant mothers, when we teach families about sanitation and nutrition, we prevent far more expensive interventions later. This is not merely charity, it is sound public policy and economic sense. One of the physicians, an elderly man with impressive side whiskers, nodded thoughtfully. "Your results are indeed remarkable, Dr. Reed. The Royal College is prepared to recommend that your model be replicated in other cities throughout England. We are also prepared to offer funding for a formal training program so that other physicians can learn your methods." Arabella felt a surge of pride as she watched Elias accept this recognition with characteristic humility. This was what they had worked for. Not personal glory, but the expansion of effective, compassionate care to as many people as possible. After the delegation departed, Elias found Arabella in her office, reviewing supply orders. He closed the door behind him and pulled her into his arms. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "The Royal College's endorsement means we can expand beyond London. We can train physicians across the country. We can change how medicine is practiced in England." "You did it," Arabella corrected. "Your vision, your dedication, your skill." "Our vision," Elias interrupted firmly. "Our dedication." "Arabella, I could never have achieved this without you. Your organizational skills, your fundraising, your ability to navigate between the world of wealth and the world of poverty. You have been essential to everything we have accomplished. We are partners in this, in every sense of the word." "Our partners," Arabella agreed, kissing him softly. "And soon to be parents as well." They stood together in the quiet office, holding each other, contemplating the future they were building together, a future of meaning, purpose, and love. That evening, Arabella had dinner with Aunt Agatha, a weekly tradition they had maintained since the wedding. Agatha's townhouse was as welcoming as ever, the library where they dined filled with books, and the comfortable clutter of an intellectual life. "You are glowing, my dear," Agatha observed as they ate. "I suspect there is news you wish to share." Arabella laughed. "You are too perceptive, Aunt." "Yes, there is news. I am expecting a child in the spring." Agatha's face lit with genuine joy. "My darling girl, that is wonderful. How do you feel? Are you well? Does Elias know?" "I am well. And yes, Elias knows. He is delighted and terrified in equal measure, as am I. We are discussing how to manage the clinic and the new training program while also preparing for parenthood. It will be challenging, but we will manage." "Of course you will," Agatha said firmly. "You have already accomplished far more than most people achieve in a lifetime. You will be an excellent mother, Arabella, because you will teach your child what truly matters: compassion, integrity, and the courage to choose one's own path rather than blindly following society's expectations." "I hope so," Arabella said softly. "I want my child to grow up knowing that worth is not measured in titles or wealth, but in how we treat others and what we contribute to the world." "That child will be fortunate indeed," Agatha replied. "And speaking of contributions, I have news of my own. I've been asked to write a series of articles for a progressive journal about women's education and social reform. They want me to include your story, how you transformed from a conventional debutante into a force for social change. Would you be comfortable with that?" Arabella considered. 6 months ago, the thought of her story being made public would have filled her with dread, but now, if it could inspire other women to question their predetermined paths, to seek meaning beyond marriage and social status, then perhaps it was worth the exposure. "Yes," she said, "but tell the whole truth, Aunt. Tell them about my mistakes, my naivety, my initial helplessness. Tell them that transformation is not easy or instantaneous, that it requires courage and support and the willingness to fail and try again. I do not want to be presented as some kind of heroine. I want to be presented as a real woman who made difficult choices and found her way to a meaningful life." "That is exactly what I shall write," Agatha promised. A week later, Arabella received an unexpected visitor at the clinic. Charlotte Pembroke, who had been working steadily for the past months, appeared at her office door with an unusual expression, part nervousness, part excitement. "Arabella, might I speak with you privately?" "Of course. Come in, sit down. Is something wrong?" Charlotte settled into the chair across from Arabella's desk, twisting her hands in her lap. "Nothing is wrong. In fact, something is very right, and I wanted you to be the first to know. I have received a proposal of marriage." Arabella felt a flash of concern. "From whom?" "Charlotte, please tell me you have not accepted someone unsuitable out of desperation." No, nothing like that," Charlotte interrupted, a genuine smile breaking across her face. "Do you remember Mr. James Whitmore, the journalist who sometimes attends Agatha's salon? He has been volunteering at the clinic, writing articles about our work to raise public awareness." Arabella did remember him. A serious, intelligent man in his early 30s, with dark hair and thoughtful brown eyes, who wrote for several reform-minded publications. He came from a respectable but not wealthy family, and his work was driven by genuine conviction rather than social ambition. "He has proposed to you?" "Yes. We have been working together on several projects, and we discovered that we share similar values and interests. He knows everything about my past, Arabella. I told him the whole sordid story, my affair with Sterling, my cruelty to you, my disgrace, and he said that who I was matters far less than who I am choosing to become." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. "He sees me, truly sees me, and values me not for my connections or my appearance, but for my mind and my commitment to our work. I never thought I would find that." "I am happy for you, Charlotte," Arabella said warmly, and she meant it. "Mr. Whitmore is a good man. You will have a partnership based on shared values, which is worth far more than a title or a fortune." "I know that now," Charlotte said, "because I watched you and Elias, and I saw what a real marriage could be. You saved me, Arabella. When you offered me that chance at the clinic, you gave me back my life. I will never forget that." "You saved yourself," Arabella corrected gently. "I merely opened a door. You chose to walk through it and do the hard work of changing. That courage was yours, not mine." As Charlotte left, glowing with happiness, Arabella reflected on how much had changed in less than a year. The woman who had been her tormentor had become her colleague, and tentatively her friend. The scandal that had seemed like the end of her life had been the beginning of something far better. The humiliation she had endured had led her to purpose, love, and genuine happiness. That afternoon brought another unexpected encounter. Arabella was in the women's ward, checking on a young mother who had just given birth, when one of the nurses informed her that a lady was asking for her in the waiting room. A lady who refused to give her name, but insisted it was urgent. Curious and slightly apprehensive, Arabella went to investigate. She found a young woman of perhaps 20, beautifully dressed in expensive traveling clothes, her face pale and frightened. She looked vaguely familiar, though Arabella could not immediately place her. "Mrs. Reed?" the young woman asked tentatively. "I am Miss Eleanor Hartley. I need your help." Recognition dawned. Eleanor Hartley was the wealthy merchant's daughter Sterling had been courting in Yorkshire, the woman Charlotte had mentioned months ago. "Miss Hartley, please sit down. What brings you to London?" Eleanor's composure crumbled. "I have run away from my home in Yorkshire. I was engaged to be married to the Marquis of Ashford, but I learned... She pulled a letter from her reticule with shaking hands. "I found this. It is a letter from Lord Ashford to his steward, discussing his plans for our marriage. He speaks of me exactly as I heard he once spoke of you, as a means to an end, a fortune to be exploited, a naive fool who will serve his purposes." Arabella took the letter, reading words that were sickeningly familiar. Sterling had learned nothing from his previous disgrace. He was simply repeating the same pattern with a new victim. "I heard about what happened to you," Eleanor continued, tears streaming down her face. How you discovered his true nature and had the courage to refuse him publicly. I want to do the same, but I am terrified. My parents are furious that I have run away. They believe this marriage is a great honor for our family, that my objections are childish and foolish. I have nowhere to go, no one to turn to, but I remembered your story, and I hoped, that perhaps you might help me. Arabella felt a surge of anger at Sterling's continued predation, but also a fierce determination to help this young woman avoid the fate she herself had escaped. You did the right thing in coming here, Miss Hartley. You are safe now, and we will help you. First, you will stay with my aunt, who has experience protecting young women from unwanted marriages. Then we will contact your parents and help you explain your situation. And if necessary, we will make Lord Ashford's letter public so that no other woman falls victim to his schemes. Eleanor's relief was palpable. Thank you. Thank you so much. I was so afraid I would have to face this alone. No woman should have to face such things alone, Arabella said firmly. We must support each other, protect each other, and refuse to accept treatment that demeans us. That is how we change things, not just for ourselves, but for all the women who will come after us. Over the following weeks, Arabella helped Eleanor navigate her escape from the unwanted engagement. Agatha provided refuge and counsel. Elias offered medical testimony that Eleanor was of sound mind and her objections were rational and justified. And when Eleanor's parents arrived in London, furious and demanding, Arabella stood beside the young woman as she calmly explained her reasons for refusing Sterling, presenting his letter as evidence of his duplicity. Faced with documentary proof of Sterling's character and the support of influential reformers like Lord Pemberton, Eleanor's parents grudgingly accepted her decision. They returned to Yorkshire, and Eleanor remained in London, taking a position as Charlotte's assistant at the clinic and beginning to build a life of her own choosing. Sterling, meanwhile, faced yet another public humiliation when Eleanor's story became known. His reputation, already damaged, was now completely destroyed. No respectable family would consider him as a potential son-in-law. He retreated to his Yorkshire estate, reportedly bitter and isolated, his dreams of restoring his family's fortune through marriage permanently dashed. Arabella felt no triumph at his downfall, only a quiet satisfaction that justice had been served and another woman had been saved from his manipulation. As winter gave way to early spring, Arabella's pregnancy became visible. She continued working at the clinic, though Elias and the staff insisted she reduce her hours and avoid the most strenuous tasks. She spent her time training others to take over her administrative duties, ensuring the clinic would run smoothly during her confinement and the weeks after the birth. One mild April afternoon, as cherry blossoms drifted past the clinic windows, Arabella sat in her office reviewing the quarterly reports. The numbers told a remarkable story. Patient visits had tripled, mortality rates had dropped significantly, and the training program was preparing to send its first class of physicians out to establish similar clinics in Manchester, Birmingham, and Liverpool. The work she and Elias had begun was spreading, touching lives far beyond London's East End. Elias appeared in the doorway, his face alight with excitement. "Arabella, come quickly. There is someone I want you to meet." She followed him to the main ward, where a distinguished-looking couple stood speaking with one of the nurses. The woman was perhaps 40, elegantly dressed but with kind eyes and a warm smile. The man beside her was older, with grey hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. "Arabella," Elias said, "may I present Lord and Lady Ashworth? They have travelled from Somerset specifically to see our clinic. They wish to establish something similar on their estate and have come to learn our methods." Lady Ashworth stepped forward, taking Arabella's hands in hers. "Mrs. Reed, we have heard so much about your work here. My husband and I believe that every person, regardless of their station, deserves access to quality medical care. We want to bring that vision to our tenants and the surrounding community. Would you and Dr. Reed consider consulting with us? We would compensate you generously, of course, and the work would help hundreds of people." Arabella looked at Elias and saw her own joy reflected in his eyes. This was what they had dreamed of. Not just one clinic, but a movement, a fundamental change in how society viewed its responsibility to care for all its members. "We would be honored," she said. As spring deepened into summer, Arabella gave birth to a daughter. They named her Agatha Eleanor Reed, honoring the aunt who had offered refuge and the young woman whose courage had inspired them. The baby was healthy and beautiful, with Elias's hazel eyes and Arabella's delicate features. Holding her daughter for the first time, Arabella felt overwhelmed with love and hope. This child would grow up in a different world than the one Arabella had known, a world where women had more choices, where compassion was valued over status, where meaningful work was possible regardless of one's birth. It was not a perfect world, not yet, but it was better. And Arabella and Elias and all the people working alongside them were making it better still, one patient, one clinic, one changed life at a time. 6 weeks after the birth, Arabella returned to the clinic, bringing baby Agatha with her. A nursery had been set up in a quiet room where the baby could sleep while Arabella worked, and the staff took turns doting on the newest member of their community. It was unconventional, certainly, but everything about Arabella's life was unconventional now. One afternoon, as she nursed her daughter in the small nursery, Charlotte appeared at the door. She was married now, happily settled with James Whitmore, and still working at the clinic part-time, while also writing articles about social reform under her married name. "Arabella, there is someone here to see you. She says she knew you before everything changed." Arabella looked up to see a familiar face from her old life, Lady Margaret Thornbury, a young woman who had been part of her social circle during her engagement to Sterling. Margaret looked uncomfortable but determined. "Arabella, Mrs. Reed, I hope you will forgive the intrusion. I have been following your work, reading about the clinic and your advocacy for the poor, and I wanted to ask if there might be a place for me here. I'm engaged to be married in the autumn, but I find myself dreading it. My fiancé is suitable in every way society values, but I do not love him, and I do not believe he loves me. Watching you choose a different path has made me question whether I must accept the future that has been planned for me." Arabella smiled, shifting the baby to her shoulder. "There is always a place here for someone seeking meaningful work, Lady Margaret. But I must warn you, this life is not easy. It requires sacrifice, hard work, and the willingness to face society's disapproval. You must be certain it is what you truly want, not simply a romantic escape from an unwanted marriage." "I understand," Margaret said, "but I would rather face hardship doing something meaningful than spend my life in comfortable emptiness. Will you help me, as you helped Miss Hartley and Lady Charlotte?" "Of course," Arabella replied. "That is what we do here. We help people find their way to lives of purpose and dignity. Come tomorrow, and we will discuss what role you might play in our work." As Margaret left, her face alight with hope, Charlotte lingered in the doorway. "You have become something remarkable, Arabella. A beacon for women seeking a different path. Do you ever regret it? Do you ever miss your old life?" Arabella looked down at her sleeping daughter, then out the window at the bustling clinic, then at Charlotte, once her enemy, now her friend. "Not for a moment," she said. "I have everything that truly matters: love, purpose, meaningful work, and the freedom to choose my own path. I would not trade this life for all the titles and estates in England." "Neither would I," Charlotte said softly. "Thank you for showing me that such a life was possible." After Charlotte departed, Arabella sat alone with her daughter, listening to the sounds of the clinic, voices in the halls, footsteps on the stairs, the cry of a newborn in the maternity ward, the murmur of Elias's voice as he examined a patient. These were the sounds of her life now, and they were beautiful. She thought of Sterling, isolated in his Yorkshire estate, his ambitions thwarted, his character exposed. She thought of the woman she had been a year ago, frightened, constrained, living a life designed by others. And she thought of the woman she had become, strong, purposeful, free. The golden cage was gone, shattered beyond repair. In its place was something far more valuable, a life built on love, integrity, and the courage to choose her own path. She had bloomed where she was planted, but more than that, she had chosen where to plant herself, and the garden she was cultivating alongside Elias and all the others who shared their vision was more beautiful than anything she could have imagined in her former life. As the afternoon sun slanted through the nursery window, casting golden light across her daughter's peaceful face, Arabella felt a profound sense of gratitude and contentment. This was happiness, not the shallow, performance-based approval of society, but the deep, abiding satisfaction of a life lived with purpose and authenticity. She had been humiliated, betrayed, and cast out from the world she had known, and it had been the greatest gift she could have received, because it had forced her to discover who she truly was and what she was truly capable of becoming. The secret letter had exposed Sterling's betrayal, but it had also exposed the truth about Arabella herself, that she was stronger, braver, and more capable than anyone, including herself, had ever imagined. And that truth had set her free. If you've been listening to this story, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments which part of the world you're listening from. I want to know how far this story has traveled. Your support helps me bring more stories like this to life, tales of courage, transformation, and the power of choosing your own path. Thank you for being part of this journey.